Good day. Today we are going to discuss the introduction to cascading style sheets, CSS, creating a container using CSS, and old/traditional and modern layout styles. To start with, let us begin with the introduction to CSS. CSS, cascading style sheets, is a style sheet language used to control the appearance and layout of web pages. It changes colors, controls fonts, adjusts layout, makes websites responsive for different screen sizes, and adds visual effects such as hover effects and animations. CSS is important because it separates content, HTML, from design. CSS makes websites consistent and professional, saves time by styling multiple pages at once, and helps style and design web pages to make them visually attractive and user-friendly. There are three main ways to add CSS to an HTML file: inline, internal, and external. Inline CSS is applied directly to an HTML element using the style attribute. Internal CSS is written inside a style tag in the head section of an HTML file. It keeps all styles in one file, making it easier to manage than inline CSS, although it still mixes content, HTML, with styling. And the last one is external CSS. External CSS is created in a separate .css file and linked to the HTML using the link tag. It keeps HTML and CSS separate, is the easiest to maintain, can be reused for multiple pages, and requires managing an extra file. Let us now proceed to the next topic, which is how to use selectors. Selectors can be called from HTML in three ways. First, by using the HTML tag, element, selector. Second, by using the class selector. And third, by using the ID selector. Please observe carefully how the selectors are used and called. Using IDs and classes in CSS has both advantages and disadvantages. An ID provides a unique identifier for a single element, has high specificity that overrides most other styles, and is useful for JavaScript targeting. However, it can only be used once per page. Its high specificity can make overriding styles difficult, and it is not reusable for multiple elements. In contrast, a class can be applied to multiple elements, is reusable and flexible, and is good for grouping similar elements for styling, but it has lower specificity than an ID, can become messy if overused without proper naming conventions, and requires consistent naming to avoid confusion. Please observe how IDs and classes are used when calling elements with CSS. The hashtag symbol in CSS is used to select an element by its unique ID. The main reason you should not use the same ID for multiple HTML elements is that an ID must be unique on a page according to the HTML specification. Using the same ID multiple times can cause unexpected behavior in CSS, JavaScript, and accessibility. Let us understand the parts of CSS using a class selector based on the example. Container is the CSS selector. Everything inside the is called a declaration block. The declaration block contains declarations separated by semicolons, winky face. Each declaration has two parts, a property and a value. Next, let us identify some common CSS properties, along with example values, descriptions, and typical HTML tags. The color property sets the text color. The background color property sets the background color. The width property sets the width of an element, while the height property sets its height. The padding property adds space inside the element between the content and the border, and the margin property adds space outside the element. The border property sets the border's width, style, and color. The font size property sets the size of the text, and font family sets the font type. The text align property aligns inline content horizontally. The display property defines how an element is displayed, and the position property specifies how an element is positioned. The top, bottom, left, and right properties work with position to move elements, so the overflow property defines how content behaves if it overflows its container. The opacity property sets transparency, and z-index controls the stacking order of positioned elements. The float property moves an element to the left or right, allowing text to wrap around it, while the clear property stops elements from floating. Finally, the border radius property rounds the corners of an element, and box shadow adds a shadow around the element. Let us take time to understand some CSS properties and their values. The declaration margin, 8px 12px, is a shorthand for vertical and horizontal margins, where the top and bottom margins are 8px, and the left and right margins are 12px. The declaration margin, 20px, adds 20 pixels of space on all sides of an element. For border radius, the declaration border radius, 10px 20px, sets the top left and bottom right corners to 10px, and the top right and bottom left corners to 20px. The declaration border radius, 20px, makes all four corners equally rounded with a radius of 20 pixels. Next, let us understand the different CSS position types, the display values they work with, and their explanations. Static or default position. The element follows the normal document flow. The top, bottom, left, and right properties have no effect. Relative, the element is moved relative to its normal position, while still leaving space in the normal flow. The top, bottom, left, and right properties offset the element visually. Absolute, the element is positioned relative to the nearest position ancestor, an ancestor with relative, absolute, fixed, or sticky position. It is removed from the normal flow, so other elements ignore it. Fixed, the element is positioned relative to the viewport and stays fixed on the screen even when scrolling. It is removed from the normal flow. Sticky, the element behaves like relative until a scroll threshold is reached, after which it behaves like fixed. A parent container is required for it to work properly. Let us now proceed to declaring colors in CSS. One way is to use named colors, which are predefined color names such as red, blue, or green. Another way is to use RGB, which employs the RGB function to specify red, green, and blue values, each ranging from 0 to 255. Finally, hexadecimal, hex, can be used by writing a hashtag followed by 3 or 6 hexadecimal digits to define a color, such as hashtag F00 or hashtag FF0000. I hope that you have now understood and gained knowledge regarding the overview and introduction to CSS. Let us now proceed to our next topic, which is creating a container using CSS. In creating a container, first use HTML to create a container element, such as a div. Then, use CSS to style the container by setting its width, height, margin, padding, and border. The div acts as the container, while CSS controls its appearance and layout. Now, please observe the given HTML as the backbone of our web page, including the necessary links and other parts. The meta charset equals UTF-8 tag specifies the character encoding of the HTML document. It tells the browser to use UTF-8 encoding, allowing the page to correctly display letters, symbols, emojis, and characters from different languages without errors. The meta name equals viewport content equals width equals device width, initial scale equals 1.0 tag controls how a web page is displayed on different devices. It makes the web page responsive by matching the page width to the device's screen and setting the initial zoom level, ensuring proper display on mobile phones, tablets, and desktops. The link rel equals stylesheet ref equals main.css/tag connects an external CSS file to an HTML document. It tells the browser to load and apply the styles from main.css to control the design and layout of the web page. Regarding general CSS behavior, save the CSS code as main.css. For example, code placed in the HTML elements selector can enable smooth scrolling, so that when users click internal links, anchor links, on the page scrolls smoothly instead of jumping instantly. Next, let us discuss the use of the universal selector asterisk in CSS. The universal selector targets all elements on the page. The declaration box sizing, border box, changes how the browser calculates an element's width and height, including padding and border within the total width and height, which makes layout easier to manage. The declaration font family, Arial, sans serif, sets the default font for all text to Arial, and if Arial is not available, it falls back to any available sans serif font. In summary, you can use HTML, scroll behavior, smooth, to enable smooth page scrolling, and asterisk, box sizing, border box, font family, Arial, sans serif, for universal styling of all elements. Let us now understand how the box sizing property works, especially in handling the width on an HTML page. With content box, the width calculation includes content only, and padding and border are added separately. With border box, the width calculation includes content, padding, and border, making it easier to control the total width of an element. The solid black border only sets the border style and color and does not affect the width calculation. Please also observe and understand the other features or properties related to box sizing, as they help in managing element dimensions and layout more effectively. Here are some example outputs using the box sizing CSS property. Please observe how the widths are calculated and note the horizontal scroll in each output to understand how the value of box sizing works when using it. The most common value I use is border box because of its ability to handle calculated widths effectively, making it easier to create well-structured templates. Next, call the body tag and add the necessary CSS properties. It is more appropriate to add margin and padding resets in the body rather than using the universal selector star. Margins and padding are applied to body, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, P, UL, and OL. For the final summary, the following should be included in the CSS file. Calling the HTML selector affects the entire document, including scroll behavior, and is useful for global page settings. Calling the body selector is a safe way to reset page spacing without affecting all elements individually. When using the universal selector asterisk, be careful, as it affects every element. Properties like margin, auto may cause layout issues. It is mainly used for box sizing and font resets. Let us understand the use of the margin property and its values. Margin 0 removes all margins on all sides, top, right, bottom, and left. Margin auto sets automatic margins on all sides. Margin auto 0 is considered the correct format for setting vertical margins to 0, top and bottom, and horizontal margins to auto, left and right. Let us now proceed to another CSS property that is very useful for creating templates, the display property. The display property in CSS controls how an element is rendered and how it behaves within the layout. There are traditional layout types that define the type of rendering box an element generates. A block-level element, display the block, takes up the full width and starts on a new line. Div elements are block level by default, so it is usually not necessary to set this explicitly. An inline element, display inline, flows within text and does not start on a new line. Inline block elements, display inline block, behave like inline elements but allow you to set width and height. Using display, none hides the element and removes it from the layout. There are also modern layout types that work with modern CSS techniques. Using display, flex enables a flexible box layout, while display grid enables a grid layout. Let us focus on the old, traditional way of creating layouts, starting with display block. A block-level element, display the block, takes up the full width of its container and starts on a new line. Div elements are block level by default, so it is not necessary to set this explicitly. You may choose to set a width or leave it unset when using this display. You can open your text editor and follow the provided HTML and CSS code to see it in action. Next, we have Display Inline. An inline element, display inline, flows within text and does not start on a new line. Note that setting the width on an inline element does not work on the main container. Lastly, we have Display Inline Block. An inline block element, display inline block, behaves like an inline element but allows you to set its width and height. Observe my example. Since the container is a block element, its width fits the screen. If the left and right div elements are set to inline, each div only fits the content inside. In my next example, since the container is a block element and the inside left and right div elements have no display set, they will follow the default display, which is block. To achieve a layout where the container fits the width of the screen and contains two div elements inside, each with a width of 50%, you need to use block or inline block with a set width on the container, and set the left and right div elements to inline block as their display. Please observe the given CSS code to understand how the subcontainers work horizontally while inside the main container. Additionally, to make the subcontainers always appear at the top, you need to use vertical align, top. By default, inline block elements align vertically to the baseline, not the top. Using vertical align, top forces the div to align to the top of the line, which is especially important when it is paired with another inline block element of a different height. For an additional reminder, use text align, center to center text, images, and inline or inline block elements inside a container. Use vertical align, top to align an inline or inline block div to the top of its container. Width is the way to control element width for old display types, block, inline block. To achieve a layout where the container fits the width of the screen and has two divs inside, each with a width of 50%, you need to use block or inline block with a set width on the container, an inline block on the left and right divs as the display. Display inline block gets the width from display block but behaves like inline, so it does not start on a new line. Thank you for watching this first part of our discussion. Please practice using common CSS properties in creating templates using display, specifically the old or traditional methods. As a final reminder, review the PowerPoint slides from lessons 1 to 4 for our written assessment during the face-to-face session.